Hello, everyone. Welcome, my fellow ninjas. I'm Jonathan Crow, Director of Community at NinjaOne, and I have with me Jeff Hunter, our field CTO, and Mark Giordano, our one of our product managers, one of the guys behind the scenes, making sure that Ninja is going in all directions that you need it to. Now is your chance that Mark's here to let him know all of your feature requests. Go ahead and put them in the chat. Meanwhile, Mark's just going to ignore me and play around with his lights, which he showed me his capabilities. He was jealous of my lighting system, and his is fancier than mine. His is voice activated. I think we should have some requests here, Mark, to see what your background should be. And hello, Carson. Hello, Terry. Hello, Robert. Chris. Very good to see you guys. While I wait for your requests on what color Mark's background should be, let's talk about the topic of the day. So as with all of these streams, we really like to dive into, in some cases, the newest capabilities within Ninja. This one's been around for a little bit, I think, but one that might be underutilized. And so dynamic script forms, want to dig into that and share how you all can be leveraging that and getting your teams to leverage it. This is recorded as always. You'll be able to go in, actually just use the same link, and you'll see the chats captured and everything in YouTube. It'll be here if you want to share it around. But before we dive into it, a couple other things. I just wanted to make a comment about how I had the pleasure of seeing Jeff in person last week. I actually shook his hand, and I haven't washed it since. And he's not AI. He's a human being, and I was really glad to meet him. So just wanted to settle that rumor out there that Jeff is not real.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Jonathan fell for the body double I paid to meet me. So yeah, this is he's convinced I'm not an AI. So we were I was successful.
I applied for the body double job, but they said I didn't have enough hair.
But yeah, it was actually good. Jonathan and I have worked together for years now, and we have never met in person. All of our interactions are like this. They're through a camera and a screen. Yeah. So it was nice to actually saw him walk past me, and I did a triple take because I was like, that looks like Jonathan. Is it Jonathan? I don't know what he looks like in person. And it was, in fact, him. So it was really nice to get to see him and a bunch of other ninjas.
Yes, it was great. And then Jeff and I both agreed that let's keep it like this. This is preferable. But it was great to see each other, too. And then also, while we're on the topic of body doubles and things, for those of you who didn't see, there is an announcement. Apparently, I do have an imposter who is doing friend invites, friend requests in Discord. If you see that, I shared in the announcements channel. There's some things to look out for. It's pretty like, man, it's pretty good, actually. They ripped my profile photo and the bio and everything. They have an extra period after my username, and there's other clues that you can dig on, like, we don't have mutual servers, or how late I joined. I think this one was in February, but anyway, keep an eye out for that. I normally won't be asking you to partake in investment schemes and things like that, but I tend to like to do that face to face. Anyway, let's get into it. So Jeff and Mark, dynamic script forms, maybe let's start off before we dive into the examples, why you think this is a good topic and why folks will benefit from learning about it. Mark, you want to start?
Sure. I think script form variables, it's probably one of my favorite things that we have done in the past year. I think it actually came out around 5.6 or 5.8. We've had script form variables. Somewhere around there, I think. They're fantastic, right? Like, especially both for people who can code, advanced coders, and people who can't. Being able to have them there, just the sheer amount of flexibility that they provide, and the ease of use, they're incredible. It's hard to really explain more than they're so flexible. We're going to get into it, obviously. Jeff has some fantastic things prepared, and I'm just here to poke at him when necessary. But yeah, I mean, again, the sheer amount of things you can do from passing in, simple things like usernames, or even if you want to pass in, like, a license key or something that's not necessarily sensitive data, but unique, and you want to switch it up each time, you have the ability to do that. You just press run on the script, and then you're presented with all of these different options, drop down options where you can have multiple selects. It's a great tool, and it has drastically increased the amount of things that we can do specifically on the out of box scripting team as well. And so we love that change, because versus the old way of passing just parameters, now we're able to create more complex and more in-depth scripts to take advantage of all of these different form variables that we can pass in. So it's pretty nice.
Awesome. Yeah, Jeff, anything you want to add there?
No, I think Mark hit the nail on the head. I mean, it gives you a very easy way to provide input to a script. A script could be super complicated. You don't want to have somebody modify that, or you don't want to end up with all these different iterations of scripts. To me, that's the big thing that I always hated pre-script form variables, is that you would get people who would essentially create the exact same script over and over again, and they'd have all these different copies for all their individual, use cases, usually on like a per client basis. And that just was a nightmare. So it's very nice to be able to take one script, and it can have wildly different impact based off of the input that you provide to it. And it is, as Mark said, it can be this no-code experience to where you can use this very complicated script, and even somebody like me is able to figure it out and use it.
Well, let's get into it. I'm going to pull up your screen, Jeff, and you can walk through what you want to share here.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, you will see all of these script variables inside of the script editor in NinjaOne. So we'll go to our automation library here. We can go ahead and add in a brand new script, and then over on the bottom right here, you'll see the script variables that you can add. So there are many different types here. It could be a simple string or text field. It could be an integer. It could be a decimal. I like the checkbox one because you could, for example, maybe you need to force a reboot potentially at the conclusion of the script, and maybe you want to take that action all the time. Maybe you don't. And so it's very easy to just add a reboot option to your script forms and go ahead and click on that. We also have date options here, drop downs, IP addresses. So you get a lot of flexibility with the kind of data input that you can provide to the script. So for example here, we'll go to the template library. So I know I see a couple questions there about where the template library is. So you'll see it right here under the automation section. We'll go into the template library, and actually there's a dedicated column here for if the template script that you're using has variables required as a part of importing it. And the first one that we're going to look at today is a very simple one. It's the inactive account alert, which you'll see we have for both Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. I'm going to go ahead and utilize the Windows one here today. So we'll go ahead and add that in. Now, what this script does is it just checks to see if a user hasn't logged in a certain amount of time. And obviously, that amount of time could change depending on the type of device. You may not even want to apply this at all to servers because that access should be restricted only to administrators, quite honestly. But on different subsets of workstations, you may want to, or even different clients, if you're an MSP, you may have a different threshold for when a user counts as inactive. So for example, maybe some customers might say 30 days. If you have a person who hasn't logged into a device in 30 days, you want to alert on that. But then maybe for a school, they're out for the summer. So, 30 days is way too short a time. Maybe it's 90 days for them or 120 days. And so in lieu of having to come into the script and then modify it, create all of these additional copies, I remember talking to one person who I think had to deploy Sophos, now which we don't have an integration with, but they very helpfully provide a PowerShell script to make it easy to deploy Sophos through NinjaOne. However, he was not familiar with PowerShell scripting, and so what he had done is essentially just create the unique token and add in the organization name, and then he had 30 different copies of the exact same script. And when I talked to him, I said, I really wish we had chatted last week because I could have saved you a lot of effort here. And so let's go ahead and import this and actually see what the practice of using this is going to look like. I do need to enter my MFA since I'm importing a script here. And this is just to confirm that I am who I say I am, that I'm not pretending to be Jeff and trying to import something or modify something that could potentially be very dangerous. Now, once we import that from the template library, it'll be available here in our automation library. But to actually utilize this, you really want to use this as a script result condition. So we'll go into our policies, into a Windows workstation policy, and then we're going to go ahead and create a brand new script result condition here. And I'll come down here, select script result condition, and then select my evaluation script. And so right there, I have my inactive account script that I imported earlier. And then here is where the script variables come into play. So right here, when I am executing the script or setting up the script, you can see here that I have two options. One is, do I want to include disabled users or not? And so in this case, I don't really care about that. But right here above that, I can determine my threshold for when you are, out of compliance with being an active account. You're an inactive account if you haven't logged in more than 90 days. And so again, if I had, one subset of devices, very easy for me to go ahead and change this, make it shorter, make it longer. In this case, I could just leave it set at the standard 90 days right there. And so you can see, obviously, the very basic example, you can see what the experience of using the script forms is like. I don't need to know any PowerShell. I don't need to modify the script. I think that's really important because this is, you don't generally want to have your technicians or all your technicians to have the ability to modify scripts. I would certainly want to reserve that for only higher level technicians, system administrators. Not everybody should be able to just modify or create any script that they want. And so ideally, in this case, your level 1 technicians, they never see any actual code. That is not a concept that they really need to know or understand. They simply need to know how to use the dynamic script forms that we just saw. And I do see some people asking about SMS. Yes, this is a brand new test instance. I haven't had a chance to integrate my proper authentication there. So yes, do not use SMS. Now from here, I can go ahead and determine how frequently I want to run this. So in this case, inactive accounts, they're not going to happen tremendously often here. So I'm actually fine with having this run for a couple of hours. So let's say every 12 hours, that seems like a perfectly cromulent amount of time. And then the timeout here, I'll leave that set to 5 minutes. Then I need to look at the result code. So you can either use the result code in this context, or you can do it strictly based off of the text string output. In my case, I want to use only a result code. So I'm actually going to go ahead and say when this is equal to 1, that indicates that I want to go ahead and raise an alert. However, as is, when it's set to contains, it actually is looking for some text to be present here. So this is considered to be kind of an AND operator. You have the result code, and you also need to have a specific text included. So what I'm going to do is say does not contain. And so this essentially says you don't need any text string input to be captured in order for this to trigger. You are really only strictly looking at the result code here. And then finally, I believe this script has an error notification of 2 in case the underlying mechanics of the script are not actually working properly. Let's say it's not able to retrieve the users, for example. And so we can go ahead and say if this is equal to 2 right there, this would give us a different notification letting us know that, hey, this script actually isn't working properly. This isn't considered a failure because there's inactive accounts present. It's considered a failure of the script because it can't actually work the way that we would expect. And so this would give me the opportunity to then go ahead and create a notification or create a ticket or inside of NinjaOne ticketing if I wanted to. Mark, any thoughts there?
Yeah, actually, I had one small thing to interject. If you go back into the condition itself, it's just something I want to note. Click on the condition where you were specifying the frequency and whatnot. I just wanted to mention, because I've seen this asked a number of times and there's a little confusion around there. You explained it great. The with output, it's an end. So if you're not planning on showing output, set it exactly as you have it. However, that does not mean that the scripts that you are writing can't have output. Also, I've seen people say, well, if I'm not looking for output, what happens if my scripts give output? Is that going to mess up the condition? No, it's not. This is literally just saying the condition is going to ignore any string output, and it's just going to look for the exit code. You can still output to your heart's desire or whatever you want. So I just want to make that clear because I've seen that come up a couple of times.
Yeah, no, great call out. And then you can actually do, I suppose, the inverse there if you want. You can essentially say that you don't care about the result code. All you care about is the text string output. So if you're doing like a write output and you want to go strictly off of that text string, you could do that instead. So you have options. You can use both result code and text string, just result code, or just text string. Yeah, and a good call out here. Maybe we add some informational buttons here to maybe make that a little bit more straightforward. So let's go ahead and move on to another example that is, let's say, slightly more complicated. So we'll go ahead and add that in there. We'll save that, close out, and then we'll go back into the template library. And we're going to go ahead and look for our check battery health script here. So this concept is also very simple, but it's a slightly different way of utilizing the form variables. So in this case, this is going to capture the battery health, and great, you would have that available in the activities feed. However, that activities feed, as many of you know, can scroll by really fast, and that information then gets lost. So it would be really great to go ahead and output this into a custom field. So over here, we have a very simple text string form, and we've given it a description here so that we know that this is for actually writing to a WYSIWYG custom field. We've also specified that it is a WYSIWYG custom field, and so we know that when we create this, we have to create it with that field type. Now you have other options here. Is this a mandatory form? So do you have to have this filled out in order for the script to run? And if you don't, if you did have this checked and you did not have a value inside of that form, the script would exit out. It would not actually complete. I don't think it actually even lets you execute the script, if I recall correctly, within NinjaOne. And then you also have an option here to set a default value. So you could go ahead and put kind of a generic WYSIWYG custom field name in here as a placeholder if you wanted to. And so this, again, very simple. All you're doing is taking the output of the script, and then the script itself is doing some very fancy formatting in HTML, and it's going to make it look very nice inside of an actual custom field. Another kind of very similar option here is checking for a last reboot reason. This is the exact same methodology here. We want to take this script here that is looking for the last 14 reboot reasons right there, and we want to go ahead and output this into a custom field. However, you get a couple different options here. You actually get two different methods of outputting into a custom field. So the first one is just the, what's the last reboot reason? What the most recent time we rebooted? Why did we have to do that? And so in this case, we're saving to a text custom field. Text custom field does have a character limit. I think it only supports 200 characters, if I recall correctly. So obviously, it could not take more than one reboot reason. You're only going to get the most recent one simply because that custom field type doesn't support the additional characters that you would need. However, if you want to get the last 14 reboot reasons, as we can see right here, we can go ahead and output to a WYSIWYG custom field. And for anybody who saw the custom field speedrun yesterday, the WYSIWYG fields do have a max character count of 200,000 characters. So you get significantly more headroom on those WYSIWYG fields versus a text field. In between, you have a multi-line field, which gives you about 10, not about, it gives you 10,000 characters to play around with. Mark, anything you wanted to add there?
A little bit behind the scenes on a script like that. I've had people DM me some questions sometimes, not necessarily with that script, but similar questions. Why did we give a single text field versus the WYSIWYG? What's the use case in having both of those there? Why are they there? And that one's an actually really good example and a really easy one to answer. That being, for those of you who have used WYSIWYGs a lot, obviously they're very pretty and they're awesome. You can do a lot of stuff with them. Probably one of my favorite fields, but they do not export in your reports and in your data table views. So, and you also can't add them to your device grid. but you can with text fields. So if you're looking for, the absolute last reboot reason versus a history, you just want to see why maybe 8 servers in your environment rebooted. You don't care about the last 14 at that moment. You're looking to see if there's a trend across all of them. Well, that single text field would then be allowed to be added to your device grid. And then you could actually export and see that and filter on and do reports on it that way, or just simply look at it in the device grid and be able to see a quick last reason for. So that's why sometimes you'll see multiple options. We try to think of all the different edge cases sometimes that people may use these scripts for, and then try to cover as much as we can without making it hard to understand.
Yeah, and that's a great point, that not all custom fields are created equal. Not all of them can be added to the data table that we see here. WYSIWYG fields would be one of them, because obviously they tend to have a lot more data, not really feasible to display that right here in this field. And I would also point out that you can't use the WYSIWYG fields as a part of the native custom field condition. Inside of policies. So if you wanted to alert off of something, not just display it from a reporting perspective, or use it as a filter, you would certainly want to have that text field or a multi-line field, because those types of fields are something that you can actually use as conditions natively within policies. If you wanted to alert off of data inside of a WYSIWYG custom field, you have to go the script result condition route and start retrieving that data and then parsing it in your script in order to determine if it has the particular value there that you're looking for. And of course, if you did want to go that route, using a script form variable to determine what exactly you wanted to look for inside of the code in the WYSIWYG field, that would be another good example of a script that you're going to reuse constantly, and you want to provide different input to it depending on which time you're using it. So if you did want to use a script result condition to parse the contents of a WYSIWYG custom field for alerting purposes and conditions, that's another great use case for the script forms.
I love that. That's a really good example. That was something I wanted to touch on. So thank you.
Of course. And another good example, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, this is a script that I have planned to write. Maybe Mark will beat me to it. He's a lot faster than I am. But is the tags that we've added inside of the 8.0 release. I am in a Canadian instance. And so this does have the 8.0 release. So tags are something new that you'll get in 8.0. You can create them here inside the GUI, but you can also create and remove list tags via the CLI. And while they are not going to be a native condition yet, or a atomic condition that you can use inside of compound conditions, of course, because you can interact with them via script, would be really great to be able to have a script with a variable where you can say, if this tag is present, then go ahead and raise an alert, and then use that inside of your compound conditions to chain different criteria together to determine if something should raise an alert or trigger an automation. So I will hopefully have something for that on Discord here in a week or two. As the 8.0 release continues to roll out, everybody globally should have 8.0 by the end of March.
Yep. Likewise, too, because you can set tags in scripts, too, you can do a lot of things like set a tag for a device and have a device filter looking at those tags. So now you have a way, let's say you don't have necessarily a common theme that's native to the system that you can filter for, but you know that you can run a script and tag something or check a custom field. Well, now, instead of having to use custom fields to populate some sort of custom like object across your devices, you can just simply run a script across your devices and tag them with whatever that custom attribute is that you're looking for. That's not a native attribute in the system, and then do a device filter off of that tag. And so now you have a way to group your things off of a filter that's not necessarily a native one, but you can do it via tags.
Yeah, and just to kind of show this, we're going a little off course here, but just to show you what the tags do look like, you can come to the devices menu here. You can go ahead and globally assign one if I created any. I can go ahead and create one right here. And then, of course, as we keep talking about, you can also interact and set, remove, and also know what tags are assigned to the device via the CLI. And I also saw a request there from Robert that's not about the template library, but about the automation library. And he wanted to see the columns that we're adding in 8.0 that let you know who did what and when they did it within the automation library. So there are actually new columns here. When was it created? Who created it? When was it last updated, and then who did that last update. And so I can add in all of those columns like so, and actually see them here. These are native automations, which don't get modified, which is why there is no actual data there. But if I switch over to a specific language here, like PowerShell, you can see that I have created all of these. And you can also see when I create. If over it, you do get the exact timestamp. So it's not just going to generically say a year ago and you have no recourse. You do get to see the actual date and time that these were updated. Let's go back to the template library and we'll talk about the install Windows certificate script. Oh, did I name this incorrectly? There we go. Install certificate-Windows. And so this is a relatively new script. Actually, some of the ones we've showcased here today, they are the new script release that dropped on, I think it was a little after the 28th, but you can see that we recently did launch a bunch of new scripts in the template library. This is something that does continuously get updated over time. You can see, actually, if I close out of here, that we now have 268 total scripts inside of the template library. This is significantly more than it was at this time last year, I think. Probably around this time last year, we did the very first Scriptapalooza, which added about 60 scripts into the template library. And I think that actually took us over the 100 script mark. So a lot of growth here in the past year. Thanks to Mark for that. Am I pronouncing that right, Mark?
Yeah, close enough. I'll let you pass. It's a very hard name.
It is. So this script, installing the Windows certificate, over here on the right, let's look at the script variables that we have for this. First and foremost, where is the actual certificate located? And so you can go ahead and set a path to either a local path, I believe, or to a public URL, and you're going to be able to download the certificate from that URL. You can also set some predefined options here. This is the first time we're taking a look at the drop-down options of the script form variables. And you can see here, I think this is incredibly useful because you are taking a typo out of the equation, essentially. And I think that's always a good thing. Anytime where you can add in predefined choices, which granted is not realistic for all variables, but anytime where you know that you're going to have a limited set of options that you want to allow the technicians to choose from, I absolutely recommend taking it. We all know that you work really fast on, when we're trying to solve issues. I typo things all the time. And so you want to eliminate that as much as you can, make it very easy to just go ahead and make a single selection without having to put in much guesswork. And again, I feel like that is, the script form variables are very useful for many reasons, but I really like them because they are the bumpers that you put up when you go bowling and you don't want the ball to go right into the gutter. They are the guardrails that make sure that you aren't going to make inadvertent mistakes. And, time is money. We all know that people are working fast. You want to eliminate the possibility for them to make mistakes wherever possible. And I think making a drop-down menu with predefined choices really is going to help you out. And so in this case, you can see we have quite a few options here for the certificates, all our various certificate types here. And you do have an option here to go ahead and set the top option as the default value. Note here that when you see something like this, these two horizontal lines over there, that does indicate that you can reorder the options that you see here. So you can go ahead and drag and drop to determine what the top option is actually going to be. Now, Mark touched on this earlier, but he essentially the concept of you don't want to include anything that is too sensitive inside of your script variables. And the reason is when we actually execute a script that leverages the variables, those are logged in the activities feed. So anybody with access to that device, they could go to the activities feed and they could see the variables that were entered when the script was executed. So not a good idea to do anything that is sensitive, because that information is exposed. It is in plain text. It could potentially be compromised if you're using, let's say, a local admin password. If you were using something even more sensitive than that, like an API key, you would not want to store that inside of, or you would not want to pass that using these script variables. You would instead want to go ahead and store it inside of a custom field. And so you can see here that we're referencing a custom field here, but in contrast to our previous examples where we were actually going to store the output of the script inside of a custom field, we're actually retrieving data from a custom field. And this would be a secure custom field that contains the password for the certificate, only required if the certificate is password protected, as you can see right here. So in lieu of actually passing that sensitive data, I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, the important information you need, it is in this custom field, which in this case, I think I'd recommend a secure type custom field. And that means that it's going to be able to go, and assuming that it has the right permissions, it can retrieve that credential or that password from inside of that secure field and leverage it within the script without it being exposed in plain text in your activities feed. And of course, to even access that secure custom field, it is protected by MFA, so your technician would need to log into Ninja using MFA, and then also enter a second MFA prompt in order to actually reveal or copy the content of that secure field. Mark, anything you want to add there?
No, I was a little distracted handling some chats, and
I can hear
also,
you typing furiously in there.
Also enjoying the Robert has decided to poke at another member of our Discord community about the template library, but there's been good discussion. I'm going to take this away again for a second, Jeff. I'm sorry. Someone brought up that some of the scripts, or probably a lot of the scripts, don't work in other languages. That is something we've taken feedback on probably a few months ago, maybe a little bit more now, and that is actually part of our testing where applicable now. I make sure the team tests on Japanese VMs, German VMs, Russian VMs. We have like 5 or 6 specific languages that we now test certain scripts on where we think it's feasible and that we're able to make them more universal. The system performance script is one of them. When we released that was a giant hit, and immediately people came back. Some of our German friends came back and was like, hey, this doesn't work. And so we immediately went back to the drawing board and got out a release for that as soon as we could. And now that one is universal. It's worked on every language we've tried it on. So where applicable, where we think it's possible, we definitely do try to consider that and make those scripts universal. So just wanted to call that out. But yes, secure script variables or secure sensitive information should absolutely be pulled from a secure custom field right now, as you went over.
So let's move on to a slightly different example here. We're going to take a look at a script that's actually been around for a little bit. I think it actually was launched in the first Scriptapalooza that we did last year. And this is for creating a new local user. This one has a ton of script variables, as you can see here. And I'm not going to go over all of them. We're kind of trying to build on what we've seen previously here. We know what username we want to add, what the display name should be. And then right here, we have the custom field where we want to go ahead and store the password. And so all really good script variables. I want to focus on the date and time ones that we see down here. And so the concept is when we use this script, this is intended to provide temporary access for a user. It's access that is not meant to be long-term. We shouldn't be using local admin on devices. So we're going to do sort of a temporary user here, and they're only going to be, they're only going to be enabled after a certain date and time, and then they could be disabled after a certain number of days. And so here, we have a date and time custom field here. And so this is when we actually want this person to be enabled. And we have the option here to go ahead and select a date and time. Now, one thing to be aware of here is when you're working with this, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, but I believe that this is going to give us the date and time, according to your organization settings. And by organization settings, I mean, if you go to the general administration section up here, it is going to adhere to the time zone that you have set right here, which is currently set to Los Angeles. And then second to that, it is also going to be, I believe, an ISO format. Is that right?
For the date and time that we're pulling from the script?
Yes. When the date and time is passed into the script is accepting that as in an ISO format, right?
Oh, passed into it, yes.
Yeah. And so that's just something to keep in mind with as you are processing that data, that it is going to be in that format. So you need to make sure your script is going to account for the proper format there. I know that not everybody uses that type of format. So this is really useful. You might need to provision a temporary user. This is something that I did a lot in my previous experience. You would have somebody who's a technician from an outside company. In my case, a lot of times it was like an HVAC control person. And so I needed to get them temporary access into a device. I didn't want to, have them use the existing user account or anything like that. So I could provision a temporary account for them. And because it had the disablement of that account built in, I didn't have to worry about, hey, you have to schedule reminders to go back and then disable this account after the guy's done doing whatever his work is. So this is really convenient for being able to automate that process. I had to do it manually. I had to do it the hard way, but this is significantly easier. And then, of course, after we enable them, how many days after that date do we want to go ahead and then disable them? We also have an option here to determine if they belong to the admin group or not, as well as the password expire options. Again, because there is a finite selection here, we're using a drop-down menu. And again, I would just encourage that anytime you are doing something that involves where you can see that the selection is going to be of only a few different options, I highly recommend coding that into your script forms so that you do not have people who are typing in the wrong thing, even by accident, and potentially causing problems. Let's go into another example here where we are talking a little bit about how we actually parse the input inside of the script that we are receiving. So we're going to use the Chocolatey script here. This is really useful. I know a lot of people use Chocolatey. So first and foremost, we have the action that we want to take using Chocolatey, which is a sort of the pre-Winget package manager for Windows. And we have a couple different options here: install, upgrade, uninstall. Right here, we have the actual package name that we would want to perform that action on. We have the actual version here that we might want to specify. Do we want to allow downgrades? Again, that's a nice, easy checkbox. Allow downgrades or not. Again, makes it dead simple to use. There's really no question here about what the behavior is going to be for this script. Do you want to install Chocolatey if necessary? Again, that is a checkbox, and it is one that we do have pre-checked here, so that Chocolatey would be installed if it is not already. That way you don't have to end up having a separate script that does nothing but confirm if Chocolatey is installed and then install it if it's missing. An option to upgrade Chocolatey, and then here we have the actual, we have an option here to skip the sleep interval here. But let's actually go down here and talk about how we are parsing this into the script itself. So right here, we have our documentation at the very top, and then we have a parameter block right here. Whenever you are using a parameter block, it does need to go near the top of your script or at the top of your script after all of your documentation. So all of the comments here, that does not count. But if I tried to put this parameter block, lower in the script and have other stuff above it, in my experience, that does not work. So you do want to have your parameter block at the top of this script. And you can see here that we are accepting a few different types of parameters. We have our action here, we have our name, we have our version, but then right here we have our first one that is using the script result these script form variables. And so here we're saying, hey, for allow downgrades, we're going to go ahead and use the script variable that we see right here. This is the format that you actually use to reference these variables inside of the script. It's going to be $env, colon, and then the actual name of the variable. In order to make this nice and easy, you can actually go ahead and say, hey, I want to allow downgrades right there. It does auto-complete here, so I can see the option there. Just hit on that, and it will automatically populate that right there. And you can see here that I am converting this into Boolean. I'm not really sure, Mark, what format this would be in natively. Maybe this is like a 1 or 0 or true or false.
Yeah, so actually all of our script variables pass they're pass the information as environment variables as string data. So in a checkbox, we're literally passing the string true or passing the string false. So this makes it easier to just kind of understand, and it's more of the recommended practice is just converting it to an actual true or false Boolean versus the string variation.
And you can see we're doing kind of something similar down here as well, right here with all these checkboxes. But you'll notice that some of these right here, like we're clearly establishing the parameter should be the environment variable, but we're not doing that up here. And that's because you can actually see right here, we're checking to see if those variables included actual information that we want to utilize. So right here, if we say that we have basically a non-null value inside of a script form, we want to go ahead and take that and use that to establish the action variable that we see right here. And then we're doing that for the package name and the package version as well. Now, to get into it a little bit deeper, to take into account potential typos, what happens if you add extra spaces onto the end of the thing that you're trying to install? Well, right here, you can see we're actually doing a little bit of processing on the input. So we're saying, hey, let's go ahead and trim all the additional white space that could be around that particular variable. Again, just trying to account for potential human error and then eliminate the problems that could cause roadblocks and could eat up more time, cause a technician to go and spend a bunch of valuable time trying to fix something. We're just trying to think ahead here, anticipate what people are going to do. It's very natural to go ahead and just automatically hit the space bar when you're typing something in. I do it all the time. So this is just processing that data so that it is sanitized and is not going to cause any issues with the actual execution of the script. Anything you want to add there, Mark, in terms of how to ensure that the input that is being passed is not going to break a script? Are there any other common pitfalls that you've seen that it's good to account for from a script writing perspective when using the script forms?
There's a few things. Really, there's a lot of things you could do depending on what the information is that you're passing through, what you're trying to. I call it validation, right? So, for instance, sometimes there are technically script form variables that the script needs you to fill out information on, but we don't mark them as mandatory because of the way that the script is written and the way some of the other form variables interact. We don't have a way to do like, if this one's mandatory and this one's not, but you select this one, there's no way to override that inside the UI itself. And so a lot of times we'll put validation around the variable in the script. Is it null or empty? If it is, exit and explain, you have to fill this one out. We need this one. If the other one's not filled out or something like that. So there's validation around that. You'll see as you go through a lot of our scripts, there's validation around some of the inputs that we're expecting. So a lot of times if we're expecting a URL, we want to make sure we try to encourage best practices as far as security is concerned. So if we're accepting a URL to something, we try to force it to be an HTTPS URL. So we will actually look for the start of that URL to look for HTTPS and then tell you if it's not. So it depends on what data you're passing through, what information you're passing through. We'll do different validations against those variables to try to, keep the scope of what we're accepting to what we expect it to be.
Yeah, and that's a really good point there, is that sometimes, and actually I have an example of this, sometimes you do need input from multiple script variables. So you need to have data in multiple forms present. And so that sort of logic there, that validation logic, you need to have that inside of the script to make sure that, well, hey, you have input in this script form, but this script form is dependent on input in another script form. And so you need to confirm that both or all of the script forms that need to have that input are all present and accounted for. I think that was in the compound conditions webinar I did a little while back. There was this option here for updating software deployment. And you can see this has a lot of different script variables. And the concept here is essentially that these are paired together. You have a list of organizations that you want to append, and then the software you would want to append into the custom fields. You have the organizations you'd want to remove the software from, and then the exact software that you would want to remove. So you need to, in my case, I needed to go ahead and build in that sort of validation logic to say, hey, if you have, in order to have data in this particular field, that is contingent on you also having data in another field. And you can see, in my case, probably very ugly logic here, but you can see I'm just confirming right here that these are both not null. So if I'm using append to organizations and I have the software to append to organizations, those both need to be in a not null state. And if so, then I can go ahead and use this as my primary, or use this as a variable within the script. I can essentially proceed to the script itself. Another thing to take into account here is processing data that is being input into these script forms. For example, in this particular case, I'm expecting a comma-separated string for the list of software or the list of organizations that I would want to impact through the API. So if I come down here a little bit further, you can see, well, first of all, I have my function that validates and tests all of my parameters there. But if I go down a little bit further, you can see that I'm actually processing, all this data is being processed via by taking into account that there's going to be a comma in between each of those values. And so that way you can see here, I have my split based off of the comma right there. And then for each object, I'm trimming out any of that white space that we mentioned earlier so that empty spaces don't end up causing problems. So that's how I end up with all of the org names that I'm going to be using here and all of the custom field values or all the software values that I want to impact. I need to go ahead and take into account that I am expecting a comma-separated string to be, the input that is passed into the script. Mark, anything you wanted to add there?
No, not there. Thank you.
Sweet. So let's go into another example here, which is going to be the application tracking example. This is very kind of similar to the deployment example that I mentioned earlier, but in this case, I want to focus on my check for the authorized applications. The idea is that if there are applications installed that are not whitelisted in a custom field within Ninja at either the organization level or the device level, you get an alert, and the alert will say, hey, these applications are installed, but we don't have them listed as, valid or authorized inside of the custom field. And so that lets you track when you have applications that are installed that aren't already whitelisted, and you can use the API to easily append allowed software to a custom field so that it then becomes valid, becomes authorized, and then that alert would go away. But the actual check of this is all done locally. And so this is parsing the JSON output agent text that is inside of program data, inside of NinjaOne's program data folder. And so that does include a list of all the software that is installed on the device. Now we do need to match the data that is in that file. And there are a couple different ways to do that. Let me make those a little bigger. This is not ideal for streaming probably with this dark mode that is in here. And so you can see here that this is determining how exactly you want to match the allowed list of software against the actual installed software. We all know that there can be many variations in how the applications are named, right? They might have a version number, they might have capitalization, I said magic words. I don't want to know what they are. you can see here that we have a couple different options here for how exactly we want to match that. Is it exact? Do we want to match the names exactly as they are? Is it case insensitive? Do we want to essentially take any case out of the equation? Or do we want to go ahead and do a substring match where we want to use basically the like operator to determine whether we should match using PowerShell? And so here I have a script that I'm going to reuse all the time, but I might want to have a sort of a different option for matching here. And so inside of Ninja, if I can find the right window here, I can go ahead and go into my policy. And you can see that I have this running as a script result condition.
You got worried there.
And see here, check for authorized applications. I'm always worried, Mark. There we go. And so you can see here, what I've done is I've just created a very simple drop-down menu. Do I want exact matching? Do I want case-insensitive matching? Do I want only partial matching? And so, again, just makes it very easy for me to change this based on whatever my needs are, which is the whole point of a script form variable. Mark, anything you wanted to add there, or anything that I could do better with my PowerShell scripting there?
I would never put you on blast in front of people, Jeff. You are amazing. Another example that I again, obviously, anyone that's on here that's in our community knows I'm relatively pretty active in there. Get a lot of feedback from there. Something that I saw someone asking the other day was, how can they run a simple like one-line command against a mass amount of devices? And they were like, does Ninja have a native way to do that? And the answer was no, Ninja doesn't have a native way to do that. But this is a great example of the usefulness of script form variables. You can literally make it's like 3 lines. You just make a PowerShell script in Ninja with a simple text box script form variable, name it command to run or whatever you want it to, and then in the actual script itself, you're just invoking that invoke expression and the command you typed in. Now you have a way to run an ad hoc one-line command against a mass amount of devices. So that's kind of the workaround for the people that just want to run like a quick one-liner against a bunch of devices. And again, another useful tidbit for script form variables. It makes those sort of little things very easy and very simple to do.
Yeah, I have done that before for sure. Use those variables or use a parameter to sort of mass execute a script or some code through devices en masse. One thing I would caution on there, and I believe this is still the case, there are certain characters you cannot use with script variables, forbidden characters, I guess like magic words that you're not allowed to say. In this case, magic characters. And I know one of them is the pipeline operator. I think the other one is exclamation point. I think the other one is an ampersand. I don't have the rest of them off the top of my head, but there are a couple characters that you're not going to be able to use within the script variables. And I think that's still the case, right, Mark?
It is, but soon, hopefully not for long. That is something that has been a very big topic of discussion. It is actually being actively worked on as we speak, where we'll be able to support basically any ASCII character emojis. Like it'll be pretty cool. So that's coming down the pipeline.
Good. I thought so, but I figured I'd let you deliver the good news.
Well, I thank you.
And another limitation to be aware of here is that these are environment variables. So the environment variables are going to have character count limitations depending on the system you're on. For 64-bit, I believe it's 2048 characters. And I can't remember what the other limitation is.
I do not recall offhand.
But that is just something to be aware of if you are using, like I mentioned, comma-separated strings earlier. That comma-separated string cannot exceed 2048 characters. So that's something else that you may want to build validation logic in, is to confirm that there is not an excessive amount of characters being passed. I don't know if we have our own internal logic there that might prevent the script from running or would alert in the activities feed.
Awesome. There he is. Okay, Google. Office lights the purple.
Yeah. Come on, Jeff. One of us.
Come on, Jeff.
One of us.
Do it.
I can't. I don't have the voice activated thing. So I'm just stuck here in the I guess early 2000s.
You'll be one of the cool kids one day.
Yeah. I just jumped on. If you don't stop, if there's another example, you've shared so many examples and this has been amazing. And we have a few minutes left. I want to make sure there's time for Q&A and everything. But if you do have something else you wanted to share, don't let me stop you.
No. We are ready for questions. I think we've talked about as much about script form variables as I can without sounding like an insane person. May have already passed that point. Who knows? I leave it up to chat. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Anybody? Any questions? Any requests? Jeff, amazing as always. Mark, incredible to have you here. And also, like you mentioned, man, just a great example of how there are extremely smart folks at Ninja who not only are smart and hardworking, but they're also very eager to engage with everybody. This is how we build Ninja, right? This is how we decide what needs to be worked on, what's prioritized, and definitely wouldn't be what it is without all of you on the stream. And so I know a lot of the faces and names here, or the icons and names, I guess. I know you're already in our Discord, but if you're not already, definitely come join us. It's where folks like Mark are answering questions. We have a very active script share. We've got Robert and Chris and a lot of the other folks here. Very active there. And so it's also where I'll bring up my screen here. You can see what events we're doing, like these streams. So we have tons of webinars. Jeff is on probably 90% of them, something like that. But we also have a ton of other things going on. Let's see here. Is this coming up? Oh, yeah. Look at that. What is happening? All right, maybe I'll get rid of that. If you go to our Discord, you'll see that we have an events section and we've got a ton of things coming up. So I just wanted to call out a few of those, not all of them, because there's a lot. But we have a few of them I wanted to call out really quickly. We've also got our IT Leadership Lab, which Brittany in the server, those who are active there will recognize her. She leads our IT Leadership Lab, and that's where we cover less technical topics and more the how do you manage people, both internally and externally within your company. How do you do that better as an IT leader? And then we've also got some exciting stuff coming up on the FedRAMP side. With the federal certification aspects of FedRAMP, and then also CMMC, we actually have a customer who went through the CMMC certification process. Took them a lot of time and effort, and they were super awesome and actually shared learnings throughout the whole journey. It's Bobby Guerrera, Axiom. They're going to be jumping on, let's see here, on March 26th for another stream like this, and they're going to talk through exactly what that looked like for them. And we're going to be joined with some folks who have worked on the FedRAMP side with Ninja. And so if that's something that you're thinking about with your MSP or that you're curious about, that'll be a really good one. And then speaking of 8.0, we have our friends in Canada who have already playing around with things. We have our friends in EMEA, likewise. It's going to be hitting US at the end of the month, like Jeff mentioned. And then that first week of April, I believe it's March 31st through April, 4th or something. I'll do math later. We're going to have 8.0 week where we're actually going to switch things up a little bit. There'll be a great webinar with Jeff walking through 8.0 and a lot of the new features. We're also going to dive in and have some of the other PMs come on and tackle this in little bite-sized slices. And so I think we're scheduling those at different times throughout the day to try to hit different audiences, but we're going to be covering little slices of all the goodness that's coming in 8.0 so you don't miss it. And so like always, if you have any feedback, comments, questions, concern, anything at all, let us know. We want to hear about how to answer your specific questions. We also want to know how can we communicate with you guys better. What else would you like us to do on these streams? What else can we do better in general? Okay, now that I've given all those things, we've got some good questions here. And Mark, you may have answered one of them. Both
I was
on
trying.
screen anyway. You're too quick. Yeah, any info about policies for cloud monitoring and a loop for cloud monitor?
Yeah, I don't have any specific information for
Gotcha.
that specifically. But again, our Discord, we do have a channel directly for NMS. You know, a lot of the project managers, product managers, as you've mentioned, are on there. And a lot of them stay, you know, a lot of them stay in their respective channels, but some of us migrate out and, you know, but you know, that's a useful place for some information. And of course, always feel free to submit questions to your account manager. They will get it over to the appropriate product managers who could speak better to it, quite honestly.
Yep. Well said. Either you guys want to take a crack at this one?
On OCI, I'm not sure I know what the OCI abbreviation is for, but in general, if you can script and write queries, which you can against MySQL, then you should be able to write a script that would connect to the database and grab the information that you're looking for, and then absolutely anything you can script against, anything that you can gather, you'd be able to do that.
All right, perfect. Yeah, Stephen, we'll get back to you with the answer. I know in general, NMS is something that there's a lot of activity going on right now. So, just for our future
Oracle Cloud infrastructure, I guess.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for taking time. That was huge. So many great examples. Thank you both for sharing that, and thank you both for sharing your knowledge in all the places, Discord, here, everywhere. And thank you all for joining us, everyone. We'll be back next week with more streams. And in the meantime, have a great rest of your week.